What's up, YouTube? How's it? Jeff Anderson back again. Today I'm going to talk to y'all about catching speckled trout, saltwater trout, and that is definitely one of my favorite species to target, especially here on the mid-Atlantic, on the East Coast, anywhere from Virginia all the way down to Florida. Speckled trout are by far, Christy and I here at One Fish, Two Fish, one of our most favorite species to target. We love doing it right behind our house here on the Chesapeake Bay. Unfortunately, we did have a pretty big fish kill this past winter, but the temperatures are on the rise, and let's hope that we do have a solid rebound. Hopefully this year we'll have some good-sized trout in the mix. But before I do start this video, I do want to preface, before I teach y'all how to target these trout and hopefully up your numbers of catching them, with that fish kill that, again, from anywhere it's really north of like Wilmington, North Carolina. I heard that, some of them even went as far as down to Charleston. For a quick minute, just want to talk about being smart about if you are keeping trout. Maybe don't limit out if you're just going to be feeding yourself. Think twice about how many trout that you are keeping. Let's try and get those trout numbers back so that everybody here in the mid-Atlantic and on the East Coast can enjoy the great trout fishery that we have. Okay, so with all that being said, let's just get right to it and let's talk about how you guys can catch more trout. I'm going to kind of bounce around. I'm going to talk about mainly the lures, the baits, and the locations. I'll talk a little bit about the equipment that we use, but that's really like secondary. Trout are a pretty finicky species. They are actually of the drum family, so you'll catch trout and drum with the same lures, same tactics, and that's also what makes it kind of fun. But trout also like to school up more. Trout and drum also prey on the same type of fish and the same type of crustaceans. So they act essentially the same. They're opportunistic feeders and they follow bait. But for the most part, trout are a migratory species, and they're going to hang out, around when that water temp is above that, really 68-degree threshold. When that water gets above that, that's when you're going to start seeing the big numbers. First of all, they're going to follow the bait. Trout, their main source of food when they're younger or smaller, it's going to be like crustaceans and shrimp, silver sides, pilchards, sardines, those types of things. So that's why with, lures such as this, like shrimp, are going to be highly effective. You're going to catch tons of trout. You cannot go wrong with shrimp, especially for trout. But as they get older and they mature, that's going to switch more to like mullet and to larger baits. So plankton is a huge component of the ecosystem, and specifically zooplankton. It's pretty interesting, actually, if you like Wikipedia it. When you look in the description of zooplankton, a fun fact is zooplankton, some part of that is Greek for the wanderer. And that actually is very fitting because plankton just kind of get like blown around, and the shrimp, the mullet, and all of those bait fish, the silver sides, porgies, so on and so forth, they'll follow the plankton. And so where you have plankton, you have bait. Where you have bait, you have trout. So hopefully that makes sense. So one of the favorite places for me, if I'm going to a new area for me to locate where trout could be, is I'll find a grass flat. Grass flats are excellent. Again, you'll catch flounder, trout, and drum all throughout the many grass flats that we have of the inshore areas. But what I'll look for is, if you can find a location that has like a grass flat, maybe 2 to 3 feet of water, and then you'll have next to that grass flat, adjacent to it, like moving water, like a channel, maybe like an intercoastal waterway, something of that sort. And again, that channel only needs to really be like 4 or 5 feet, and that's almost considered like deeper water for these trout. Best case scenario is that you would have like a smaller creek where those crustaceans, the crabs, and those types of creatures will hang out. If you can find a location that has really all 3 of those features, then you're almost guaranteed that there are trout somewhere around there. Now, trout are also kind of like a finicky fish. Sometimes that bite will just turn off. Like, you'll find yourself catching trout every single cast. And then just out of nowhere, like, you'll be fishing and be like, man, we were catching them nonstop. Like, what happened? And that's it. You know, trout are kind of a finicky fish. You know, sometimes just the way the current and the tide and whatever it is, just their attitude, could even be the color of your lure. That bite would just, boom, it'll just turn off. And so the best thing for you to do is either maybe to relocate, change the color, change the presentation of your lure. You know, again, maybe try and find another similar structure or a similar scenario there, you know, maybe a little bit further down. So those are some things that you can do, but also to kind of be aware of. You know, trout are these finicky feeders. They will school up, and that's another thing that we're going to talk about. Trout will school up when like they're, you know, smaller, when they're not a gator trout, you know, anything say below 25 inches, you'll find stacks on stacks of trout anywhere between like 10 inches, 15 inches, and then you'll find a few in that 18 to 19 inch range. The gator trout, so let me actually get back to the smaller kind of schooly trout. Those trout are schooling up because even like bluefish will, like, they're kind of like the saltwater piranha in a sense, because they'll like chomp at these trout that are like almost twice the size as big as them, and they'll just, with their sharp teeth, they'll just take a bite out of a trout. And the bluefish will also kind of school up on the trout, and it's kind of like a little gang war going on. So they're like, you know, schooling up on each other. So trout will get into these large schools. As they get bigger, you'll still find some of the gator trout in the schools, but they tend to kind of hang out towards the sides of the school. They're not really in that close pack. So my recommendation is, when you find yourself catching the trout and catching these little dinks like 10 to 15 inches, try casting to the side of those schools, and that's where you're probably going to locate that gator trout. Very rarely will you catch a smaller trout that's just kind of a loner and hanging out. So trout do school up. That's one thing. So, you know, that 68 to 74 degrees is just ideal for trout. You know, again, in the dead of summer, you're still going to be catching excellent trout. But that's where in the summertime, they say, you know, early morning and the evenings are, you know, going to be great. And sometimes that bite might turn off. You know, that's what, you know, some of the inexperienced fishermen will say. But some of those trout, they're just going to go right off of that grass flat, and they're just going to go right to that deeper water. So let's say that you had a few days to fish the same location. And one morning you go out and you're just in like... Weird. That's what happens when your wife works at home and you're downstairs talking to YouTube trying to help people catch trout. So anyways, so that's where sometimes what I'll do is I'll find trout. I'll catch them one day where it's like 2 to 3 feet of water, and I was there out in the morning. Maybe the tide was right, maybe their mood was right, and I was just tearing them up. And then the next day I'll go to that same spot and they're not really there. What you can try doing actually is pull off of that 2 to 3 foot flat and maybe try, you know, working some of that like channel that's that like 5, 6, 7 foot area, because some of those trout might have just pulled off. They really don't go far from where their channel is up to, or where their deeper haunt is, up to those flats. So, you know, trout are kind of going to stay within that same area for the most part. But a lot of times that's where a lot of people become successful, is where they can find trout in their different, you know, kind of attitudes and behaviors based off of the weather conditions and the bait. Where you can find the fish is so important. If you can just find the trout and 9 times out of 10, you're going to be catching them, whether it is off of like a topwater. People say use topwater only in the morning, in the evening, in the dead of summer. There's people who I know who use topwater throughout the whole day, and they catch the mess out of trout. So if you can just find the trout, you're going to be successful. So, you know, again, trout are opportunistic feeders. They follow bait. They follow the shrimp. They follow the crabs. They follow the pilchards, the mullet, and the porgies, and all those small silver sides, all the bait fish. You know, where you can find the bait, you are likely to find the trout. Where you have moving water is great. Where you have moving water next to a flat that, you know, maybe kind of goes into a cove, where you have like a creek mouth that comes out, that is awesome. Guarantee that you're going to find trout there. You know, again, jetties are great, bridges are great, you know, overpasses, you know, that cover structure. You know, trout, they love the higher salinity. You know, shrimp are a huge component of their diet in the crustaceans. So, you know, shrimp love those grass flats, and just, you know, again, just keep in mind that the trout are motivated, other than spawning, they're motivated by where they're comfortable. So where that water temp's in that like sweet spot of right around 70, 75-ish degrees. So whether that's, you know, going to be like in the shallows, especially in the mornings in the dead of summer, or it's going to be there in our, you know, May, June, September, October, November months, or, you know, they're going to pull off and, you know, they're going to be in those channels. Trout are a fish that you have to search for. People watch Christy and I's YouTube videos and they see us just catching the heck out of trout. And, you know, there's tons of other people out there on YouTube who are just, you know, obviously tearing up trout. But what you don't see is that for Christy and I and all these other people, it could take you an hour, hour and a half till you're finding where the trout are, where that school is. And then once you find them, then you're on them. You know, we will work certain jetties, certain parts of jetties. Maybe we'll go to the other side of the jetty. And I fish right next to people, and they've caught maybe 1 trout for every 10 or 15 trout that I have. So they are a fish that you do want to search for, and a piece of confidence for all of my non-boater people out there, to all my beach fishermen, to all my wade fishermen out there. You're probably going to catch more trout than people in boats, because again, trout are finicky. They'll get spooked easy. And that's why it's important for you to make long casts. I will show you all, whoa. So I will show you all 2 poles that I like to use for trout. And this is a 7-foot trout pole. I actually showed it in my, I think I showed it in my flounder video, but you know, again, same setup here. It's a 2500 spinning tackle. And then I have also another one of my favorite inshore rods is this Shimano. Ow! Man, that thing was sharp. Is a 7-foot medium action right here with my favorite pin clash reel set up right here. I'm gonna go ahead and put this thing down because this thing's hurting me. But yeah, you want to fish. I would recommend at least like a 7-foot rod for trout, because you want to make sure that you're getting long casts. Braid will also help that too. You'll be able to make those longer casts with braid. Okay, so let's talk about the fun stuff. Let's talk about the lures that I'm using to catch these trout. So I'm going to go ahead and start with more of like what I typically throw when I first get out there. Some of my confidence lures, and that's going to be, all of y'all know if you watch any of our videos, we love the Popping Cork. When we're wade fishing, we're fishing, you know, again, those grass flats 2 to 3 feet, and the Popping Cork is deadly. You put the Popping Cork on, new penny colored shrimp. So this is our Berkeley Gulp lures in here, and I just throw tons in there. So I throw anything like a jerk shad. I know this is like the nuclear chicken color. Okay, so my favorite lure color. These 2 right here. This is the new penny. So a 3-inch new penny colored shrimp. is just so deadly. This is my most confident trout fishing lure. New Penny Berkeley Gulp shrimp. And then I have the New Penny Jerk Shad. This is another great lure as well. I have pictures of these. I have it also in the description of the video. So that's typically what I'll throw when I'm wade fishing. If I am fishing a jetty, if I'm fishing something that's maybe a little bit deeper, then that's where, you know, I'm going to fish like a jig head, anywhere from a 1/4 ounce to a 3/8 ounce jig head. And I'll even throw on the, I'll throw on like a shrimp, but I'll also throw on the Berkeley Gulp swimming mullet. So same thing as flounder fishing. And, you know, I'll just bounce it up along the rocks there too. That is a great tactic there. But I would like to feature one bait that actually, Christy and I, when we were in Florida this past winter, this is like the most popular bait down in the Fort Pierce and Stewart area. And I cannot wait to throw this in the summertime. And these are the Monster 3X shrimp. They are very tough. They're very durable. And I'm going to have a picture of these. But you have to pair it up with this special hook. I'm going to have a picture of all this. But this is like a, I believe it's either a 1/16 or a 3/16 ounce weight right here. It's weedless. So when you're fishing grass flats, it's perfect. And you can literally just swim it through the water, and it is so deadly. It's not going to get caught up in the weeds. And it's to me, as a bass fisherman and saltwater fisherman, this is such a blast. It's so fun because you'll see your line moving just like bass fishing, and then you're setting the hook. It is just an absolute blast. So I'm going to have a description of this lure right here, and I would highly, highly recommend this one. You could like fish this off of a jetty. You could bounce it off of rocks. It's not going to get hung up as easy as, you know, something like with an exposed hook, like an exposed jig head right there. You know, you're fishing this almost like a Texas rig, you know, bass, you know, soft plastic. Deadly, deadly bait. And these baits, you can just use the heck out of these baits, and they're just so durable. So I'm going to have a description for those there. Now, anybody's favorite type of fishing is topwater, and trout love topwater. So these are the two topwater lures that I throw. I have a, this is a Spook Junior, and this will just walk along the top of the surface. When I get there so like when I get to where I'm fishing in the morning time as that sun's coming up, there's nothing better than enjoying a beautiful sunrise and walking this across the water and just seeing that trout smack this. These things are so deadly. So I have a Spook Junior, and then I have the Rapala. This is a Skidder V10, and essentially the same action there. You know, it's just going to walk across the water there. It's like a walk the dog. So you're just twitch, 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 and it's going to, you want this type of motion here. And again, those trout, especially the bigger trout, they're feeding on the mullet. They're feeding on those pilchards, and that's what it's emulating right there is, you know, just that bait fish that's right at the surface, and it will just get destroyed by a big gator trout. It's a blast. So this is another one here, and this is just a beautiful topwater, you know, again, great, like kind of more of like a mullet emulation. To talk about trout fishing lures, you cannot talk about trout fishing lures without mentioning the MirroLures with the red eye. Probably the most popular trout fishing lure and the most effective. So let me break this down for y'all. When I'm out there and I'm fishing my Popping Cork with my New Penny color shrimp, or now I'm fishing with this one, and say I'm catching like tons of these like 15-inch trout, and you found the school of them. What I will always do is have another rod tied on with one of these red eye MirroLures suspending twitch baits. And these right here will catch you the biggest trout of your life. Not to say you won't catch a gator trout on the Popping Cork. The Popping Cork is more of like a numbers bait. It's more of like a confidence bait, at least for me, but it is a numbers bait. with numbers, you will get size, but you will have to work through those 10 to 15 inch trout. For all of us who are out there and we're just trying to catch fish, that's great. But I will say, with trout, you can get a little selfish because you're going to catch tons and tons of trout, and you're going to want to catch that gator trout. When you want to catch that gator trout and you find that school, throw on this twitch bait right here and just let this thing just sink and give it twitches. And let it sink or suspend right there, and it'll twitch. And I will guarantee you that you will hook up on the trout of your lifetime. Christy and I, we do our fishing reports out of Oceans East, and they weighed in a record amount of citations for trout here in the Virginia Beach area, and like the vast majority of those trout came in on this lure right here. Some other lures that you can use. This is a Yozuri. Again, this is a more of like a shallow diving jerk bait, so you can also use this one. I would recommend using this also when you find that school and you're looking for those larger trout. So that's all I got for you guys today. Would love to hear your feedback. I love doing these things for y'all. I'm just stoked on catching fish. Over the next month, looks like we're going to have that weather that's finally turning, and we've got some days coming up in the 70s. So we can't wait for April and May to get here. And I will be doing another video on drum fishing and how to best target and locate the red drum. I really appreciate the support that you all give, Christy and I in these videos. And, just keep it coming. I'll keep the videos coming. And let's get out there. Let's catch more fish.